This is interesting to me, and it sounds like you haven't actually been on a cruise, but the second class cabin area is apparently just these like handful of like big open rooms with a bunch of hammocks hanging in them.
Yeah,
Is this like a thing?
So this is something I put in my notes because I have seen this before.
Where?
I've actually participated in this, but
I have never seen that. I've been on like 4 cruises probably.
not a cruise. I mean, I've never been on a cruise, but
I mean, there's like hostels,
I'm
right?
talking about being in the hammock. So back when I was in college, I did a quick tour, if you want to call it that, through South America. And there was one leg of the trip I had to take by boat. It was up a river and I had to go from one location to the next. And it wasn't a massive boat, but it was a pretty big boat. And the purpose of the boat was to move goods up and down the river. And the second level was exactly this. So you've
seen this on a boat, like hammocks
absolutely.
On a boat. Really?
Not only that, but you would pay to rent the hammock for the trip. And if I remember correctly, I paid like the equivalent of like $6 American, right? To rent this hammock.
To rent a hammock.
And so
was it in like a room like this with just a bunch of hammocks?
A massive big room. There's no partitions of any kind. You walk in there and they literally hand you the hammock and you take it in your arm and they tell you like, just pick whatever spot you want. And you basically hang up your hammock and that's where you stay because that boat ride was like 12 hours or something and it was overnight.
But were there like families with children and vacationers?
There were absolutely families with children. There were old people and then...
But were they actually trying to get to another location versus...
Exactly. They were just moving from location to location. Like
not necessarily going on vacation.
They were definitely not on vacation.
Okay.
This was the equivalent of like you and I taking a red eye between like San Francisco and New York, but on a boat, on a river, on a hammock.
Yeah, and I guess I shouldn't feel that that's super weird because on airplanes, everybody's like sleeping packed in, like sardines, sleeping next to strangers. And it's awkward enough that you got like the drooler and like the mouths hanging open. And it's just like, and you got first class and second class, just like you do on a ship. I've just never seen hammocks on a ship. If I were taking my family on a vacation, I don't know that I would want to like put my children in a hammock next to some randos. Like it just was weird because I assume this is a thing somewhere. And clearly I've lived a blessed life as an American who's gone on these cruises.
I was going to say, you've never seen this, but
like I've been to South America. I've been to some very impoverished places on some humanitarian trips. And I could see it happening in like an area like that. But like on a cruise ship for people going to a beach town, it was kind of interesting.
I've never been on a cruise ship, so I've never seen it there. And frankly, anywhere else in my life have I ever seen that.
I just wonder if it's a thing in Japan, right?
Oh, it could be.
Does anybody know? Anybody out there know? You've been on a hammock in the middle of the ocean?
The thing was that the minute I saw it, immediately it reminded me of back when I was in college. And I was like, well, that's weird because this is a casino boat. This isn't the same thing, right? This is a completely different thing. But, it was kind of the same sentiment, which is
like it's almost a transporter ship.
Yeah, exactly. It was just it was a point A to point B. And so like I remember that the reason I did this back then in college was because this was like the budget way to get from one place to the other. And there were 2 things I remember distinctly about this. Like one of them was that obviously it was hammocks and it was awkward. But the second thing was it had like this little kitchen, I guess is the best way to call it. And this was some of the best food I've ever eaten in my life. It was
really? On that ship, on the hammock ship?
On the hammock ship, because it was like somebody cooking their home cooked food inside of this little kitchen. I remember it was like chicken with like, I think rice and beans and something else on it.
It probably is rice and beans if it was in South America. That sounds right.
I mean, I slept so well on that boat. It wasn't even funny. But yeah, to see that in this thing, I was like, well, I haven't seen this scene in 20 years. But I would never expect to see it on a cruise ship.
That's the only thing is like a cruise ship. Like, are there cruise ships in Japan maybe that have hammocks or something? Like, I don't know.
Who knows? But hammocks apparently are a thing now.
Apparently, and that's fine. It's not like a critique. It was just like, oh, big rooms full of hammocks. Not super familiar with that on a vacation.
On that floor, right? And then when you go up the staircase, it's like all opulent and like...
Right. They do have the first class, but they don't actually ever let you see the rooms.
My apologies. But these are the first class cabins. Other passengers are not allowed beyond this point.
So you don't know if they're just like big open rooms with like actual beds or if they're like individual rooms. Like you don't know.
You know that it's going to be like a presidential suite. It's going to be like the residence on Etihad or something like that up there, right?
I don't even know that the developers made that decision. I think they just kept the doors shut so they didn't have to.
That's another thing that reminded me of the Titanic because one of the things that like James Cameron went through great lengths to portray in that film was the difference in like socioeconomic status between the protagonist and then the filthy rich people that were on the upper decks of that ship, right?
But like the third class passengers still had individual rooms. It wasn't like big open rooms with a bunch of hammocks. They had like probably 4 bunks per room or something like that.
Exactly. What quarters would look like on a Navy ship.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Same exact thing. So this was different, and I could not figure out by the end of the chapter why this was this way.
Right.
But I'm always one of those people that believes like, no, there's a reason they put the hammocks in here.
Yeah, you give them a lot of credit. You're like, that cushion is purple and it must represent the royalty of the person that's about to sit in it. And I'm like, they just wanted that to be purple because the design looks nice. Like,
I mean, yeah.
I don't give them as much credit as you do.
That's true, but it's like, why a hammock and not bunks?
I don't know. Somebody obviously made a decision, but that's why I'm thinking more logically. Like somebody's been on a ship like this, like the developers, maybe this is a thing in Japan, maybe.
Or the person who designed this particular set had just come from a South American trip and rode on the ferry that I did.
It could be something like that. It could also be something as easy as just they wanted it to be these open, accessible rooms for us to walk around in.
To run around, yeah.
It's probably just that, right?
Yeah.
Which is fine.
We spent so much time on these hammocks. Like, now we're going to go research on Amazon hammocks.
We are going to get to the bottom of these dang hammocks.
Yeah.
If it kills us.
If it kills us, yeah.